doing what? House this information. It's going to host this information, right? So the question we need to ask ourselves is, if we are using an application to host our data, to host our information, what are some of the things, or what are some of the risks that are involved in this situation? There are so many types of risk, right? And one of the risks among these is what we call information security risk. How secure is this software? How good, or what are the security components of this software to ensure the security of this data? I believe within the same hospital, you would have nurses, you have doctors, you have other health care workers in that hospital, probably accessing the same type of system, right? But the question is, does everybody has the same amount of permission? So one person can access that software, and what we see. I remember, you want to say something? All right. One person might access this application or that software, and the things that he sees might be different from what you see. In the same vein, wherever you're working, you probably have access to the computer, but then maybe there are certain things that you can see or certain things that you cannot see, but then your boss, your manager is able to see it, right? On the same application. How is this thing possible? This thing is possible because there are certain security controls that have been built into that application. And so your manager can be given one permission, a certain type of permission, which you might not have the same permission because of what you do at the workplace. And so your manager might get to see more information than you get to see that information. And so if we are bringing in application into our organization, there are so many things, including this thing that I just talked about, that we need to check to make sure that this specific application, we will be able to configure access based on whoever will be accessing that information. And so the information that the doctor can access, that same application, maybe the nurse will not be able to access the same type of information. Whatever the nurse can access might be limited because she or he is a nurse. You get it? So when we talk about vendor risk management, we are basically talking about companies or organizations using the services of vendors, which is the vendor product or a particular vendor service. And when I say vendor service, apart from application, it could be, let's say, a cleaning agency that comes to your work to clean the place up. It could be maybe a payroll company that does your payroll for you, right? It could be an insurance company that is providing insurance coverage for the employees of your organization. All these companies are vendors. And because all these companies might, in one way or form, might have certain touch points to your company data, they present risk to that data. And so, as an organization, what do we have to do? We need to be able to analyze this risk and then manage the risk. So, when we talk about vendor risk management, in short, what it means is organizations managing the risk presented to them because they are using the services of another company or the products of another company. That is what vendor risk management is. And when we come into the vendor risk management space, it's extremely broad. It encompasses various domains, right? And you coming in as a domain expert for information security, you only form just a piece of the puzzle. Because just look at it this way. When a company is bringing in a vendor or bringing in a particular product, and that product might, in one way or form, have some touch points to our company data, there are different types of risk that these products or services will present to us. And one of the risks is what I said, information security risk. We have other type of risk. We have compliance risk. What is compliance risk? Compliance risk is a situation whereby maybe your company, you are in the financial institution and your company needs to meet certain financial obligations or requirements, statutory requirements, right? And so you are supposed to meet those obligations or requirements because you are a financial institution. And so if you are going to use a particular vendor product, let's say a software, to process this financial information or data, which needs to comply with certain financial regulations, what is the risk that is that you are facing? You are going to face some sort of compliance risk because the same measures that you have to put in place to ensure that you meet that financial obligations, right? You need to make sure the vendor or the product that is you are bringing on board will also meet the same, right? And so there is some sort of financial risk which can tie into compliance risk right there, because you probably have to comply with certain financial regulations, right? What type of other risk? We can talk about legal risk. If the product you are bringing in, if the product is going to process, let's say, personal information. Let's take, for instance, Ccpa, California Consumer Privacy Act. And I know most of you probably might have heard about California Consumer Privacy Act. It's a data regulations that was enacted in California, and the intent of it is to protect California residents' data. And so if anybody is in California, if you are a resident of California, and then a company like Facebook, right, has your information, and you pick the phone up and you call Facebook, Facebook, I want to know that all the information you have gathered about me. Per the California Consumer Privacy Act, Facebook is obligated to provide you with that information. So the California Consumer Privacy Act does what? It confers some sort of rights onto the consumers of certain products. And these consumers are California residents, right? So it's in a way protecting these California residents. And this person can also ask Facebook to delete every information that they have about him or her. And Facebook is supposed to comply, because that is what the regulation mandates, right? And so let's assume that our company needs to be CCPA compliant, meaning maybe we process a certain number of California residents' data, and so we are supposed to be CCPA compliant. That is a requirement. Now, if we are going to use the services of another company, and that service or that product that we are going to get from this company, if that product is going to house data belonging to certain California residents who happen to be our customers or our employees, what do you think is happening here? We need to make sure that this vendor also complies with California requirements, right? Or we need to test certain controls that they have in place to make sure that in the event where we are called, right? Or in the event where a customer wants to exercise their rights, we can also go to the vendors that are housing that information. Let's say, for instance, this consumer wants us to delete this information. We should be able to go to that vendor and also request them to delete that information, because we gave them that information, not the consumer. You understand? So there is the compliance or the legal aspect or the legal risk of we working or using the services of a particular vendor. So apart from the information security risk, we have compliance, we have legal risk, and let me talk about the last one, which is business continuity or resiliency risk. What is resiliency risk? Resiliency basically deals with ability to stay available, right? So let's say you are hosting, you have a website, right? You have opened a virtual store on the internet, and that virtual store is hosted on a certain platform, right? Maybe on a day you are making on a daily basis, you're able to make about $5,000 worth of sales, right? But then before you are hosting, or before you hosted your website on this platform, you didn't even check the hosting providers' ability to stay online for a certain amount of duration or time, so you'll be able to make that amount of money. So you didn't do your due diligence, and now, before you realize, this hosting provider services go down. It goes down, and now it goes down for about 6 hours. You are losing that $5,000 a day sales, right? And so some vendors also, by virtue of the service that they provide for us, right, they pose some sort of resiliency risk to our organization. And so we should be able to analyze and assess these vendors to make sure that they have the right or the appropriate controls in place to sustain the services that they need to sustain our business. So Amazon, like a big company that is an online company, assuming Amazon is to go down for even 30 minutes, Amazon is going to lose how much? Millions and millions of dollars. And so Amazon will make sure that if any company is providing them with any type of service that needs to be online or that needs to be operational 24/7, Amazon will make sure that they do their due diligence to make sure that whatever provider they are using can meet a certain operational status. Otherwise, they might, or they stand the risk of losing millions of dollars should that provider service go down. So the company is working with a vendor. There are different types of risk that they stand to face. And so as a company, when or anytime we decide to choose a particular vendor who is going to provide us with certain type of service, we need to be able to analyze all these type of risk. And then we ask the right questions. We ask for the right evidence to support their claims that they will be able to meet all our security and operational requirements. So this is what vendor risk management is. Managing all these types of risk to ensure that we are able to achieve our company's strategic as well as operational goals. And when you join the class, I take you through the various vendor assessment life cycle, right? So this is how the life cycle is. So first of all, it begins with when a particular vendor is identified, right? So when within the company, and I'm going to restrict it to information security because that is what you are going to do. So all the other things that I said, like business continuity and all those things, like I said, they all form part of the puzzle, and information security is a piece of that puzzle. So let's just focus on information security. So with information security, whenever your company wants to bring in any vendor, obviously your company or the information security team will be pulled into the picture because maybe something has been triggered. There is going to be some sort of a data touch point, or there's going to be some sort of an application. Anytime a vendor is going to provide something that will have any touch point with our data, or they are providing us with a certain application, information security, you will be pulled into the picture. And when information security is put into the picture, what do? What we do is to analyze the engagement, try to obtain the maximum understanding that we can obtain from that engagement, understand what the vendor is going to do, what type of data and other things that we look for. Once you get this information, as an analyst, you would be able to do an analysis, right? You will be able to do an analysis to determine that, okay, this engagement is going to be a high risk engagement because XYZ is going to be involved. This engagement is going to be a high risk engagement because this is a vendor that needs to stay online or that needs to be operational 24/7. Their services do not have to go down, and so this is a high risk engagement, and so we are going to give it this type of attention. So we have to look at all these dynamics, right? Once we look at all these dynamics, and then we're able to establish that, hey, this is the risk. Let me use going for visa in, let's say, the American embassy as an example. If you're going for a visa at an American embassy, you're going to fill out an application, right? The application that you are filling out and the information that you are giving, somebody is going to review it. The person who is going to review this information is trying to determine whether you are a high risk traveler or you are not a high risk traveler. That's why they ask certain questions. That have you traveled before? Do you have travel experience? Do you work? Do you have any business? Do you have any property? They are trying to see whether you have certain ties in the originating country, so that they can determine that, okay, this person has this much of things going on in this country, and so he's going to come back. He's not going to be a higher risk. You get it? That's the same thing. When a vendor, before a vendor is onboarded, we look at all these things to determine whether this is going to be a high risk vendor or it's going to be a medium risk vendor. And based on that analysis, we will be able to ask the needed questions that we need to ask from the vendor that, okay, we identify this type of risk. What do you have there to prove that this risk cannot impact us? And that's where the vendor will come and say, oh, for this thing, we have this. For this thing, we have this. What are you doing? You are trying to mitigate or reduce the risk using the evidence that they are giving you. So the class covers all these things, right? So what are some of the evidence? There are so many evidence that we can collect. Once we have been able to analyze or analyze the responses of the vendor plus the evidence that they provide, we would be able to make a determination that, okay, at first, before we had the conversation with the vendor, the amount of risk stood at, let's say, 10. After having that conversation with the vendor, the amount of risk that we stand to face now has reduced to, let's say, 4. So the risk has reduced significantly, even though not all the risk has been taken away or has been, eradicated, right? And so then we have to make that decision. The remaining risk, is this something that we can accept, or we still want, or we still will need them to fix that remaining risk? And that comes to where the business, because after you do your work, you have to present what your findings and then your recommendation to business that, hey, this is what I saw about this vendor and the services that he provided for us. And so make a decision. If you decide to go with them, this is the risk we stand to face. This is the impact to our organization. Are you okay? Are you ready for this risk? Or the business will say, oh, we are ready for the risk. We're going to accept it. Fine. Or the business will say, no, let them fix it. Right? And then we will come into the contracts and that kind of stuff. So let's say the vendor is going to fix the problem. Then our company will have to sign the contracts, right, for this engagement. And that is where we will be able to incorporate some of these things into the contracts. That, okay, hey, before or within the contract, we are going to give you 6 weeks, and we're going to have it captured in the contract. Within these 6 weeks, you need to fix this problem. If you don't fix it, we can terminate the contract. This is embedded in the contract, and everybody has signed to it, the vendor and your company. And so, if or in the event where the vendor is not able to fix it within the time frame which they have appended their signature to, that means we can cancel the contract, right? So this is how we manage the risk of vendors within an organization, right? And from that point, after everything is all said and done, and we have onboarded the vendor, periodically, we have to make sure that whatever they told us, whatever they said, whatever their controls were, right, we have to go back and reassess them to make sure that they continue to be compliant, right? And that's why, let's say, maybe you're a principal in the school, and then every year there will be authorities coming from the government to check to make sure that the right thing is always being done. That's the same thing that we do in the business space. We always have to check our vendors to make sure that whatever or the obligations that they have to meet, they continue to meet them, and their controls are still intact. Because at the end of the day, our data, the data that they have, right, is very, very important to us, and we need to make sure that they have the right controls, and the right controls continue to exist to protect that data, because in the event that data falls into the wrong hands, we, the company or your company, is the one who will have to face the consequences. And so this vendor risk management space, right, is fairly new to the IT world. And I can tell you for a fact that most companies haven't even gotten a hang of how to even go about this whole vendor risk process. And like I said, I've worked with multiple companies where, like, the entire IT security team, they just don't know anything about how to manage that process. They have the idea about how to test controls, but then how to execute and make sure that they have a program in place that is structured and repeatable, right? They do not have that know-how. And so that is why most people who are able to get on this training and apply to these jobs, like, I can say that I have about 60 to 70% success rate with a class that I do, especially when after the class, my students begin to apply for the jobs, because I give them all the things that they need to succeed. And the most interesting thing is that, you know, the vendor risk management process, it has a beginning, it has an end, but most companies, right, do not go through the entire process. There are so many companies where they will hire you, and then you'll be performing just a piece of the entire process. So let's say the process is maybe when the request comes in, somebody, you have to review to analyze the risk, and then you have to send a questionnaire. When the questionnaire comes, you have to review, and then if there are any issues, you have to follow up to make sure the vendor fixes it, right? So some companies, you only be doing, let's say, just the intake process. If the company wants to bring in a vendor, you do the analysis. A whole different team will be responsible for sending out the questionnaire, and a whole different team will be responsible for managing the issues that were identified. But then the class is able to teach all these things, including contract reviews. And so once you get on the call with the hiring manager, you know the whole thing from A to Z. And so if you happen to interview with a company where these steps are divided among different teams, it makes you stand out, and then they feel like, yo, this is the person that we need on this team, because this person has the entire experience that we need. And so as I draw my speech to a close, what I'm saying is there are so many potentials in the vendor risk management space, and I have a lot of people on this platform that can testify, or that will come and testify of, you know, how their lives have been changed, or how their lives have impacted, because now they've been able to land themselves on six-figure jobs when they used to be working, or they used to be making between 35 to 40K a year. So vendor risk is new, it's here to stay. The only thing that you need is your mind, your mentality. Make it a point to be able to read, understand, and just get the interview, and you're all good. And I yield my mic. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Icesty. You said a lot, and you know, I'm pretty sure everyone has picked up. Before I get into a few questions that I have with you, everyone, if you're here today, this is your first time, welcome to Diaspora Techies. We're here to empower each other to get into tech. If you're here and you're thinking about getting into tech, or you don't know how to, this is the right time. And if you have questions, make sure you reach out to any of the monks on stage with the green buttons. Definitely will be able to assist you actually get on track. Now, my next question is, did we lose Icesty? Okay, I think he's having technical issue right now. Before he does come on stage, I do have a few things.
No.
You are? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I guess I need my glasses tonight. people are on the stage or below wanting to know how does one become a vendor analyst?
All right. So thanks for the question, let me clarify this. So if working in the space of vendor risk management, you are still an IT security analyst, right? So that's your title, or you could be an IT security engineer, whatever the case may be. So yes, and what it takes to get in this field is not much, right? Especially for the folks that are new to IT and they haven't done any research or they haven't done any type of studies on IT security. What I typically recommend is there's a video on YouTube. I always say this because I have seen people watch this video and we have had discussions on them and they've been able to understand what IT general controls are, because that is like the basis of IT, right? Getting the basis of IT is the most important thing, right? Once you get the basics and then you join a class, it's just like building on it. So that sets the foundation. The video, which is a Professor Mesa video on YouTube, it sets the foundation, right? You're able to understand what IT controls are. So when we say a control like antivirus that you have on your computer, that's a control. Even your door in your house is a control. The cameras, they are controls. So anything that prevents something from happening or anything that reduces the impact, so the brakes in your car, the seat belts, all these things are controls because they prevent or they reduce the impact should something go south, right? And so all these things are controlled. And when you watch this video, it introduces you to various types of control. And so you're able to get the understanding of what basic IT controls are, the types of controls like physical security controls, administrative controls, technical or logical security controls. You get it? You're able to get those basics. And then once you are able to get our basics, right? And I always tell people, you watch the video. If there is anything that you do not understand, if there's anything that you have questions on, just call me. That's free. We will discuss it because your ability to succeed is my number one priority. And you can ask most of the people that I have taught in the past that you call me 24/7. I'm always on the call, ready to have the conversation with you. And so the one thing that you need is to watch those videos, get the understanding. If it is not clear, let's have a conversation, and that's it. If that answered your question, everyone.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. So again, welcome to the for Techies. I see that the hand raise button is on. Please be patient with us. We will be opening up the hand raise button soon, so that if you have questions for IC, you can definitely come on stage. If you're new here today and you have not clicked on that greenhouse button to follow Diaspora Techies, make sure you do so. So, we on